This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
Question? Ask a Rabbi with Rabbi Shafir Lobb from the Treasure Coast Lexus Studios at WPSL. Treasure Coast Lexus, US 1 south of Midway Road, Fort Pierce.
So it is time for Ask a Rabbi here on WPSL with Rabbi Shafir Lobb. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is Rabbi Shafir Lobb of Congregation Eitz Chayim. And as I'm sure you are aware by this point, I have just returned from a wonderful cruise. It was just a wonderful gift to us, and we enjoyed it immensely, my husband and I, and the others that were with us on the group. So, yeah, it raised some interesting questions because we did part of Hanukkah, and of course because it was an 11-day cruise, we had Shabbat actually twice, since it went from a Wednesday through a Sunday. So I guess that's 11 whatever. It included 2 Shabbats. So, which brought up a couple of interesting things because, among other things, ships have this aversion to live flame. They don't want it on olive oil. They don't want it on candles. They don't want any live flame, something about the uncontrollability of fire. Right. And so, which raised the question, there were a number of Jews who came up to me because I was early on identified as a rabbi, saying, we have to light candles because you have to light candles. And I'm like, and you have to not endanger the ship and the couple thousand people on the ship.
We'd all like to get back home.
Right. Well, and that was ironically, that was kind of what the captain said to them. He said, we don't light flames because we want to get back to Fort Lauderdale on the 16th. And he's right, So there are times when you modify what you're doing because of safety concerns. So there's a principle in Judaism called pikuach nefesh. You do things to save a life, but those criteria are not at play in a situation like that because nobody's life is immediately in danger. Yes, it's a safety issue, but pikuach nefesh is to save a specific soul. It's to intervene to save a life that is under threat in the moment. So if somebody keels over with a heart attack, you call the ambulance, even if you're an Orthodox congregation, because that's what's needed. But if you break your leg and it hurts, you might sit down in an Orthodox congregation, wait for Shabbat to be over, and then go because the broken leg is not life-threatening. So that's the kind of thing. So that would not come under the criteria of the ship, but there is a workaround. There's always a workaround. And this is the situation of the hour is the phrase that's used. Okay, marat ha'asha'a, the requirements that fit into the situation as it presents itself. And in that case, so we look at the ritual and we modify it. We had candelabras that had lights. And so, you lit them. They had onboard Shabbat candles, which were kind of interesting. They sat there not on, and you pulled this little pin out, and then they lit up. So that was kind of a cool Shabbat light.
They lit up electronically, or with
flame? No, it was like a battery, because they were self-contained, so it had to be a battery. They weren't plugged into anything.
Yeah, I have battery-powered candles at home.
They're
like
the little
tea lights.
And these were probably maybe 2.5 to 3 inches tall, and they had little holders. So you pulled the pin out, and then you set it in the holder. It was interesting. I had to learn how to maneuver them. And then what was really kind of interesting were the number of people who came up and said their Shabbat blessings over those candles specifically. And
why is it that they could not have found a safe mechanism for Shabbat candles? I mean, I know, for example, we have candles in a relatively deep glass. They have fire all over the place in their kitchen.
No, they don't. They have electric heat.
Do they really?
Yeah.
They don't do anything with flame in the kitchen.
I did not see anything using flame, not where they were at. And we took a tour of the kitchen. Everything is electric now.
Okay, I didn't know that.
and I would, once you know how to use your electric oven, you've got control. Right. There's a difference in how you cook on electric than how you cook on gas.
I know one of the cruises I went on, Royal Caribbean, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was a fire issue because the French fries caught fire on the, whatever they call the Lido deck or whatever the heck it is.
Deep fryer, though, that would be electric too.
Well, no, there was a fire, and it was because of the French fries. And
it flashed.
all of a sudden, everybody started running everywhere.
Yeah.
And they closed up certain sections of the ship just in case, and there was a real fire. So I guess unless it's changed, at some point they use flame.
Well, again, the fire was not intentional.
Right.
Right.
But they used something that could create flame.
But it wasn't supposed to, Stuart.
Yeah, exactly.
It was supposed to.
I mean, there were probably people who smoked somewhere on the ship too who are not supposed to.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of the joys for smokers, right? How do you not do that? There's always a potential for fire, and it's very scary. Very scary for ships. I mean, go call the fire department to come out.
Well, that and there's
put your fire out.
nowhere to evacuate to.
Your lifeboats, but which is not.
Yeah, no, that's not ideal.
That's not fun. So as you said, people scatter from that location and that deck, but that puts people at danger above, below, and either side of it. So it's very, very serious. Now they treated cooking very, very intentionally. There was no Sherry's Flambe or anything like that, Sherry's Jubilee. None of the flame kind of meals were there because of the potential for fire. Fire is not a sailor's friend. Perhaps on the beach, but not in the not on the ship. And so so candles are electric. The Hanukkah candles were electric, and the Shabbat candles were electric. And it was wonderful because they made a provision for candle lighting every night, and it was in a way kind of funny because the lighting and the Shabbat service on Friday night were both at 5:00, and that's because dinner seating started at 6. Right, so you had to be done with things in order to open up the 6:00 seating, and then of course it goes all the way through. Our group did the late seating at 7:45, so we actually sat at the table at 8, and we were frequently at dinner until 10:00. Wasn't uncommon. Partially because it takes a while for them to bring everything out, get everybody seated, etc. That's a tremendous crowd management, and I looked at that and I thought, there's a drill that you do at the beginning where everybody comes out of their rooms and they go to their lifeboats, and every time I see something like that, I always think of the story of the Exodus, of what was it like to try to move a group of people through the opening caused by whatever that phenomena was that split the sea. Whether it was a tsunami or a hurricane, how long did they really have before the water came back? And I look at that, and I look at the evacuation of Florida in the last hurricane that we had. Right, it took a week to try to evacuate not that many people, and 95 was truly a parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you could go south on it, but, God help you if you had to go even one stop north. And then became that the side roads were clogged because people were trying to get off the highway to still to make
people
some
were
progress.
breaking down, and I mean, I don't think that you can move people in that short a period of time. That's the thing, when you're asking that many people to get in their cars and go.
Right. Well, and we have cars and trucks. Mm-hmm. Right, we're not trying to load up donkeys and carts. Right, which now granted, at the beginning of the water scene, if you will, everybody's already packed. The carts are kind of like lined up, and people are just sitting there for the day. But still, I look at what it takes to get a family rounded up from the rest stop and into a car. So it's just, those are little interesting logistic side pieces. And so Shabbat was clearly observed, and yet we didn't get off the ship. And, we traveled. We continued traveling on Shabbat. And it was easy enough in a lot of ways to do Shabbat, in that the ship itself is continuing to run. There are staircases between all of the flights, so you do not have to take the elevator. Now, the buffet that's open for food all the time, and then there's cold food that you can have that's on a tray, and so you don't have to violate any of the non-cooking kinds of questions. You can get your kosher pack or whatever, or just eat things that you knew were okay. But that was up on the 9th floor, and the dining room's on the 2nd and 3rd floor. So, if you're a good hiker, it works out okay. We certainly went up by foot from the lifeboat up to our 8th floor cabin, by foot, which was, I guess, 5 flights, because the line waiting for the elevator was just off the wall ridiculous. And because everybody wanted to go up the elevator, so a number of us just looked at the stairs and said, what's 5 flights? And at the top of it,
when you live in Florida, stairs are, they don't come around very often.
No, they don't.
No.
And it's actually one of the things I was thinking about. Every day I walked a couple of flights up and a couple of flights down. We had this rule that if it was only 2 flights, you walked. If it was more than 2, we would take an elevator. Or if we were like coming back from a tour, we would use the elevators. But that also actually was more than 2 flights. I was going up from the A deck all the way to the 8th floor. So, and we got to see some beautiful things.
For me, it's very hard to imagine a boat with 8 floors. I mean, I know they're big.
13, 15,
Wow.
you kidding me?
These are like hotels,
floating
hotels.
They're luxury hotels on a ship. There's 10 decks plus the A deck. The A deck's where you typically embarked or disembarked. The first floor had a stage and had customer service and a couple of other things like that. And then dining room, 2nd, 3rd floor, cabins starting at, there were cabins on every deck. And the hospital was down on the A deck.
Yeah, and they're housing their entire staff too.
Yeah.
So
In
there's
very
a lot
small
of people.
quarters.
Sure.
Well, yeah, because first of all, they're not going to be spending much of their time in their quarters. They're going to be
Working 18, 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
Now, in the Royal Caribbean, the 12th deck is where they have the buffet, and they have the grill and the pool and everything. Then they have a 13th deck, which is really, you can look out over everything, a very nice bar. And then they have one more for sunbathing. We'll leave it at that.
So, yeah, on the Zuiderdam, as the captain called it, Zuiderdam, which is the ship that we were on, which is a Holland America line or ship. It was a very nice cruise. The 9th floor was the buffet, and the 10th had observation, and there was a little bit of an 11th, but it was a basketball court. And there were multiple pools throughout. One of the things I did not get packed was a bathing suit. And interestingly enough, in the gift shop on the ship, they had bathing suits for men, but not for women. Yeah, so that was kind of interesting.
Well, maybe it's the man who normally forgets to pack it.
I'm guessing that's, they're probably reflecting what they normally sell. Plus, to sell women's swimsuits, you need a wide variety. To sell men's trunks, if they're desperate, they'll buy just about anything just to get in the water. So, didn't need as many styles to
Let me
offer.
ask you something. For the services, was it mostly your group, or were there a lot of other people that heard the Shabbat services and actually came?
No, it was in a, they opened up, they have a 3-fold room that has 3 compartments, and they had that, and I had a smart screen, and I had my thumb drive with the Eitz Chayim service, and it's, now there was a little bit of humor about it because it opens up, of course, and it says, "Thank you for being part of Congregation Eitz Chayim, being with us this Shabbat." And or whatever the words are, but it has our logo and all of that. And some people joked about that. And I said, well, if I'd had PowerPoint on my laptop, I could have modified this and put, the Zuiderdam congregation. But I didn't have that. Put the little Holland America logo, and I could just about picture Holland America going crazy over, copyright infringement or something. But we used that service because, you'll love this one, they had Gates of Blue. They need a much more modern prayer book. And because Gates of Blue, Gates of Prayer, it's the old Reformed prayer book, copyright 1973. So it's a little bit on the old side, and it doesn't have a lot of transliteration. So in order to be more inclusive for the people who came to the service, there were a lot of people. I was surprised how many were on. That I used our service with our transliteration, and that worked pretty well. We did a slightly abridged service because I didn't want to make the 6 o'clock dinner people too late. Yeah, so I had to be a little bit mindful of that. And then we did a Shabbat morning. They made a provision for us for Shabbat morning.
You were able to save about 10 minutes because you didn't have the president speaking.
That would be true. I also didn't have the intro and the non-intro of the musical pieces.
Yes, that takes up some time.
And it does. It adds a little bit of time to the service. Now, the irony of that was that, of course, I sing in all keys simultaneously. And there was one song in particular that I was singing, and I was truly all over the place. I could not hit the high notes. I could not find the low ones. And I'm looking out at the congregation, and in the congregation are the singers and dancers, a couple of them from the ship. And I'm like, okay, so we can see I'm not a cantor. I'm a rabbi. All right, I do my best, and you kind of guess the melody, but yes, I'm all over the keyboard.
Were they Jewish?
Yeah, of course.
Wow.
Yeah, they come from New York.
Entertainer.
That's a little stereotypical,
no, wait a second.
isn't it?
They're entertainers,
They're
right?
entertainers.
Well,
They're singers.
there you
They're
go.
singers and dancers, and they have to audition through the Lincoln stage, and that's who handles it for the ship, who's apparently got the contract. So a certain percentage of them are going to be Jewish, and of those that were Jewish, a certain percentage came to services.
Very interesting.
I'm sure that there were plenty of hidden Jews on the ship that didn't bother to come to services. Were either were not typically service goers or took a vacation from it or whatever. Others were probably interested and came to see. And it was nice. I will tell you that the challah they make, was to die for.
Really?
I took challah from home so I'd have something to eat. I did not eat mine. I ate theirs. It was that good.
Did they make the challah special?
They made it for anybody who asked for it. We actually had 2 loaves on our table every night. And we demolished at least, and I'm talking a loaf. I'm not talking the mini, I'm talking a loaf.
Did you have to ask in advance for that, or was it just available? I mean, I've never seen challah on any of the cruises I've ever been on.
Well, they served it for the Hanukkah celebration. They had latkes. They could stand to improve that recipe. They had jelly donuts. They could stand to improve that recipe. And they had 2 or 3 chalot every evening, and people plowed through it. We had to teach them a little bit. We taught them about sour cream and applesauce. First night we didn't have that, but we did from the second night on. They had grape juice and wine, and they also brought matzah, of course, because everybody brings matzah to every Jewish holiday. And the second day they were actually unloading that, and I looked at the guy and I said, "Take the matzah and put it away. Save that for April when it's needed. You put it out now. It's going to say to people, you don't know what you're doing." This is not part of this holiday. This is about fat and sweet and, not matzah. Totally opposite concept. This is the flip side. And so that's what we did. And that's where I first tasted the challah, and I was like amazed at it. And one of the nights, only 2 of the 3 chalot that they brought, because there were a lot of tours that didn't get back in time for candlelighting. We did. And when I got there, there was challah sitting there. And one of the chalot did not get eaten. So I picked it up and carted it off to dinner. And the waiter looked at it and said, "Oh, would you like one of these?" And I was like, "Can we have one?" He said, "Yeah, any night you want, just let me know." So we said standing order every night. And from then on, we had challah.
Mm-hmm.
And for Friday night, not only did they have the chalot, but they also had gefilte fish.
Yeah.
And wine and juice. So they were very, very accommodating. Not quite so accommodating Saturday morning. I think they didn't know what to expect because they didn't originally have Saturday on their schedule. But we had 20 to 30 people who really, really wanted a Saturday morning.
What do you do for a Torah?
That was a good challenge because I did not think ahead and bring one. I would have brought one of the camp ones. But so we actually used my laptop. I loaded it up on my laptop and
Please rise to the laptop.
yeah. Well, we didn't rise, but I was able to at least read it, and we said the general bracha over reading words of Torah to acknowledge that it wasn't a real Torah, but we still had Torah in our service.
Very interesting.
So, and that one I did of course, have to use the blue book because I don't have the Saturday fully on slides yet. So there were some accommodations, and it worked, and people were happy. And the flip side of that is I could not walk anywhere on the ship that somebody didn't say, "Hi, Rabbi." So that was.
But it's all the accommodations that were made is what made those memories too.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh yeah,
things that you didn't do before.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And it was wonderful. And poor Bill didn't get to sit with me for services, but there was another rabbi on board, and he said, "No, I'm going to sit in the back." And I said, "Thank you so much." He said, "No, I'm enjoying this." And what the heck, it wasn't worth having stress over. So it was a great cruise. There was very little else that I had to do other than go to the things that I wanted to and do the things I wanted to do. So that was great. We tried to get into the synagogue at Curacao. Curacao has 2 active Jewish communities. It's not that big an island, but they've got 2 Jewish communities. And they had split apart. You'll love this. Started a second building and then sold it and moved in with the first one back again. So they now have a combined name. But we could not get in to see the synagogue. I talked to their people, the administrator and the cantor of all people. But what I discovered was that they couldn't open it on a Sunday. Curaçao's closed on Sunday. 80% of the population is Roman Catholic. They are closed for most everything on Sunday. And that included tours of the synagogue. You can get tours of the synagogue Monday through early Friday. And then they actually do Shabbat Friday night and Saturday in the building. So if you're there for the service, you get to see the synagogue. You don't get to see the museum, but you get to see the synagogue. But they explained to me that on Sundays they can't get the security together to open it because they have armed guards. And the island, the tour made a big point of saying how free everything was, and I'm like, well, everything's so free. Why do you need guards? Why do you need guards if everybody's so cool with each other?
So do they have guards on a regular basis there?
Yeah.
Are the Jews of Curacao generally not treated well? Is there a problem?
I think that it's more a crime concern. I think it has to do with the wealth of some of the Jewish families. Our tour guide did say of one of the banks and said, "Oh, that's the Jewish bank." I thought that was interesting that she made a point of saying the Jewish bank because there was nothing identifying in the bank name. There was nothing obvious that made it the Jewish bank. And the fact that that was said speaks to something. Okay,
there's some separation.
There's something going on.
Yeah.
There's something below the surface that's not quite as rosy as she would like to present. there's at least some, perhaps some privilege going on that Jews do not have access to, or some reverse stuff going on because the Jews are viewed as very wealthy. And there's a Jewish community in the island. There's a small little island that's part of Curacao, and then there's a much bigger island that's the main part, and there's a tunnel bridge or a couple of bridges that go across the channel and connect the two. But the first place that they did it, there's two interesting stories. They built the houses out of the limestone that's on that island, and it leaches through and bubbles the paint, and the paint and plaster have to constantly be redone. These are very, very big houses. They're like 14, 16-room houses. So you're not going to run that just casually. You need a staff to run that size house. And our guide, get the right word here. Our guide said, well, it became too expensive to constantly be after the painting and everything else that needed to be left for businesses. And these homes have since been sold mostly to businesses and museums and things like that. And she said it was too expensive to keep repainting. And then somewhere somebody heard this other story that said, well, what they did is they had, butlers and maids and a whole staff that lived in the little houses behind the big houses that helped them take care of them. And when the refinery came in, the refinery offered them more money to do the refinery work. And so the big households couldn't keep the staff, couldn't afford to keep staff to run their house. And so they downsized and moved to new houses. So, yes, it's an expense issue, but it's a little more subtle than the official presentation of, the paint's too difficult. So I was sitting there like, why would a business want to have to repaint everything constantly? I wonder, though, if something, like a ceiling paint now could stop that salt. I don't know. I don't know if you can or not. So a lot of the buildings looked very fine, but I don't know if they were just painted last week. Those are all the kinds of things you can't find out in a 3-hour tour on a bus going by everything.
And then because it is a tour excursion from the ship, you don't know if maybe the cruise company may maintain those things as the attraction.
Well, no. There were all kinds of businesses and museums and things. I mean, we're talking, that's far too many houses for the tour.
Some of these companies own islands.
Well, yeah. In fact, we didn't even get off the ship in Bahamas because of that. It was Half Moon Key or whatever that is, which is a Princess Holland America
island.
And it's a lot of fun to go ride a horse in the water. Okay, that's cool. Go sit on the beach. Quite candidly, I needed my nap more than I needed that walk on the beach, and it was early on in the cruise, and so we did not even get off the boat because of, if it had been a real part of the Bahamas, we'd have gotten off, but just to get onto their private island,
right?
Plus,
sometimes that's the nicest part, actually, I found.
Well, it might be. I'm sure it was the most luxurious.
It's a more controlled environment, and but you're not getting any of the culture of that area.
Right. The ship is bringing in the staff to run their JUNQUE stores, right, where you buy your tourist stuff. So you're only getting their versions of it, and I can get the same thing in the gift shop, thank you. Yeah, but on the other side of it, you can use your ship card on that island. You didn't have to carry cash off, and you didn't have to carry a passport because you didn't really have access to the island itself. But I also, that wasn't going to be real. It wasn't going to be the real anything. As much as the tourist is not real anyway, you still get to see little windows into it. And there were a couple of little sidebar comments from people that just kind of blew me away. One was we were taking the tour. It was in Cartagena. And Cartagena in Colombia is an interesting, it's got very, very wealthy, and it's got very, very poor. With, this this large divide. And one woman on the ship made some comment about, in America we just don't have that kind of poor. And, a couple of us kind of looked at her and said, excuse me? There are people who sleep on the streets in America as well. And there was a guy, we were driving down the street, and I looked out the window of the bus, and there was a guy asleep on the sidewalk. Some homeless type. And that's where he conked out and curled up and went to sleep. And then there's these beautiful high-rises with barbed wire protecting them. So I'm glad that, for the most part, we don't have razor barbed wire.
Yet,
yeah. Well, and as some people have said, if we don't keep an eye on things, then gated communities won't be strong enough to hold it out. And I hope that we get smarter before we get there. That's a hope. And, but to think that we don't have that kind of poverty just blew me away. And a couple of people, one person actually engaged that person and said, where do you live?
but that's the thing. They don't go anywhere to see what really is
They don't
out
even know
there.
their own country.
Yeah,
They're just kind of like going on this cruise to say they did or something. I don't know. Because they're leading such a sheltered life here in America. There's a prayer that we have in our prayer book that's part of the High Holy Day liturgy, and it says, people in places too far away and too close to name. Right? To remind ourselves that, there are people who are food insecure, who are home insecure in our neighborhood. Right? Just because it's illegal to be homeless in Port St. Lucie doesn't mean there aren't homeless. As they've discovered when they've cleared out some of the different areas, there are people who are living in tents and places. And those who can't even afford that, and those who are living in their cars. And it's a hard thing. Sometimes we're enjoined to thank God and to see blessings in everything. But that doesn't mean be oblivious to the pain. That's the sidebar, the flip coin. And no, you can't give up everything you've got to everybody who's poor. But we've got to start teaching people how to fish. We've got to start helping people be self-sufficient, to put in structures. Colorado actually has done an amazing job that way. They have a lot more support for people who are not completely able to be independent. They've got systems so that they are much more independent, and therefore much less of a burden on the social support network, even though they're getting more support than we give them here in Florida. It costs less because of the kind of support that's given. And so that's something that I would hope that we could start to do something here. That to me is part of being Jewish, right? Is how do you extend that? Because that's the other side of, you can't love somebody more than you love yourself, but you can't love yourself more than you love somebody else. You have to go both ways, or it doesn't work. It's going to come out somehow ugly. We might not know how, but it's going to somehow come out ugly. And that's the basis behind the levels of charity. A lot of people say that the highest level for Maimonides is where the giver and the recipient don't know who each other are. But the level that's actually higher than that is the one where you make somebody self-sufficient. That is the highest level, because then you not only help them with their immediate problem and don't undignify them, which kind of ties into your HIPAA thing in a strange kind of way, right? Because you're not violating their privacy in the act. But by making them self-sufficient, you also help them have more dignity, which is, that's the point behind the giver and receiver should not know, because pity is actually one of the worst emotions we can give to somebody else. There is nothing haughtier than pity. Right? When you pity somebody, that's saying, I'm so much better than you. Here, let me give you a couple of shekels and goodbye. Right? That's pity. And it's demeaning, and pity's just not healthy. Not for you and not for anybody else. But when you lift somebody up, then you can really make things a whole lot better for everybody. You can get rid of the razor sharp barbed wire. That's just that was the symbol to me in these locations.
But there are people who choose to commit crimes against other folks, and you have to protect yourself against that.
You have to protect yourself.
Because that's a choice.
Understand. But there's a difference between having to use an armed guard at the door and a metal detector for everybody who walks in. And I understand, a government facility using that and the falseness of the airlines doing that, right? Because that's really not screening. It's the illusion of safety. That's a whole nother discussion for another day. And but if you can help people move away from that abject poverty and from that feeling of, I've got nothing to lose, so I'm just going to grab what I need, or I'm so dang hungry, right, that I've just got to do something, or they're methed out of their heads. There's
that's another personal choice.
Well, yes and no.
Drugs.
Well, again, some people get backed up into it. There is a genetic piece for some people where their physical makeup makes them much more susceptible to addiction. There's a difference in addicted brains than non-addicted brains. And so it is much harder for an addict to say no to something because of the way the brain is wired. Now, would that we had a little more science and could help rewire the brains. And one time people thought, you've got what you've got and you're done. We know that's not true anymore. We know that you can rewire some things, but it's harder for some people to rewire. It's certainly harder for somebody who doesn't want to than for somebody who wants to. And that's an old story, right? You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make it thirsty. And but how much of that, we just don't do a good job of mental health. We really don't. We don't identify it early enough.
Back to HIPAA again.
Yeah, well, we don't offer enough support. We need a sea change. We really, really need a sea change in our culture. To how do we help people move forward to be self-sufficient, to be contributing, validated members of community? Right? Validation is probably the most important thing that people need and almost never get. Right? We tend to forget to do that. My father of blessed memory always said, there's the real way to lift yourself up is to lift everybody around you, and then they'll continue to lift you. And if you think that you're getting higher by pushing everybody else down, well, you're standing on those shoulders, and when they go down, you're going to go down with them. And that was one of his main teachings to me, was that you never are going to get higher by putting somebody else down. That is never the route to being your best and highest self. And I guess I just took that to heart. I didn't have him long enough to teach me all the things that I wish he could have taught me, because he died when I was young. But that was one of my more guiding light kind of lessons. And so I try to embody that. I know that I fall short because we're human, and we all do. But that's the goal. The goal is to help everyone, and I work at it. I'm not a natural smiler, so I try to smile as much as I can, and smile real, right? Not just this little, and the eyes say, "I'm really not happy. Don't bother me." I try not to do that, and I'll admit that's a challenge for me because I get focused. I want to get something done. Whoosh, the blinders come in, and I don't see anything else but the task in front of me. I know that's one of my failings.
Or the list of tasks.
The list of tasks, yeah.
The list.
And I'm sorry, you're number 723.
Get out of my way. I got a lot to do.
Yeah. Well, the other comment that I'll sometimes get, and I'll admit it, you looked right at me and you didn't say hi.
Mm.
Well, I looked at you, not at you.
It may have been in your direction.
Yeah, I looked in your direction, and no, you're right. I didn't see you, and I didn't respond.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing that, actually. I went in to get an x-ray on my ankle when it was really hurting, when I twisted it. And I walked right by one of my good clergy friends. But I was focused, man, I'm going to go get my x-ray, and I want to get this done, and I need to get out of here. And I hear this, and it was done loud enough that I had no choice but to look around. And then I realized, and he said, do you always walk past people? And I went, more often than I'd like to admit. Right. And it was so I'm going to have to say thank you to him again. I said thank you to him, actually, the next clergy meeting that I had with him, for not letting me just go by and awakening me, because I admit I need that. But we all have stuff we have to work on. And I think that taking that commitment, and that, just to bring it round to circle to the cruise, is kind of the idea behind lighting the candles with an electric light. You have to work with what you have. You have to work within the situation, and you have to make it better. You have to move it to the next level. That's tikkun olam. That's repairing the world. That's the Jewish piece of it. It's, how do I do what I'm doing in a way that's better for not only me and our immediate group, but in fact the larger community. Right. So not only did we do our service, but we made a point of telling the ship thank you for making space for us. That was a way on the cruise to do that. And it's really easy on a cruise to forget to be generous, because there's so much abundance. And yet, like you said, the workers on the ship, they work really, really hard for not a lot. And they're not allowed to eat the food we're eating. They've got their food. They are treated much worse. And so, again, I tried to make a point with each one to get to know their name, to say hi, to thank them for the work they did, and not just accepting the stuff.
I noticed that even just going through a drive-through or standing at the counter at a fast food place, how poorly the people in line can treat the workers behind the counter, to not thank them, to not say hello to them. I can imagine it's the same, because everybody's in vacation mode on a cruise.
Yeah.
How am I going to have fun today?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
all about
and
me.
aren't you here to serve me? When they're there to make you more comfortable and have a good experience. Thanking them is not.
They're still human beings.
Take that time to do that.
They're still human beings. But yeah, that's actually one of the things that espionage has taken advantage of. People don't see the support staff. They're silent. They're invisible. They hear all kinds of things, and they know all kinds of things. And that's very often where espionage can take advantage of that trait in us. But think, if we actually talk to these people, then we become more aware that they're there. And I try to do that. Like, one of the things when I'm a professor in the college, somebody comes in at the end of my class and cleans the classroom, makes sure the computer's off and all of that. And I ask that person what their name is, how long they've been working at the college. I'll take a few minutes every so often and just interact with that person. And to me, that's just important. There was a famous thing in a college thing where one of the final exam questions was the name of, or the midterm, I guess it was, and then the final. What's the name of the person who cleans our classroom? Right, to force people to notice what's going on, because we all need Levites. We all need people to help, and they're not, 2 steps above an ant. Because an ant I have no trouble stepping on, but I really don't. I'm not that nonviolent.
I get a piece of paper and I take him outside.
An ant?
Oh yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah. Spiders too.
Okay.
Yeah. It's hard for me to just crush them.
Okay.
I can't do it.
So, I do draw a line at the ants. I figure they belong outside
Now
my
mosquitoes get smushed because I know they're going to bite me.
house. Oh, okay. But fire ants, you help out.
Oh well, not fire
not
ants.
fire
Usually
ants.
fire ants aren't inside the house, so yeah.
Yeah.
But if it's like one of those bigger ones that are, I call him a little visitor, and I evict him. Evict him.
I try to evict any lizards or frogs that make it into the house. And that's usually a race between me and the one cat who's like, I see it moving.
Yeah, that might be fun to. Yeah. The
Yeah,
cats,
it's like,
yeah,
no,
that's-
you do not need a lizard.
That's entertainment.
Yeah, for him, not for me. So those are all kinds of things, Where do you draw the line? I think you have to, getting back to your HIPAA kind of thing in a strange way, you have to treat people with dignity. You have to treat them with basic respect, no matter what.
Everywhere you go.
Everywhere
Yes.
you go.
I agree.
And the person you least want to do that with, right? I know that you and I have had discussions about how people should be addressed, and it needs to be respectful. And it's funny because I guess it's actually, in a funny kind of way, a privacy thing. But on the ship, they don't refer to anybody as doctor or rabbi. It's always Mr. or Mrs. or Ms. at your preference. And I actually tried to write in rabbi, and they said, no, we don't use titles. So.
Maybe, is that a Norwegian thing? Or is it a cruise ship thing? Or
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd never run into it quite like that
because
before.
you would think doctor. I mean, everyone uses doctor and Mrs.,
They
or
didn't. Everybody.
You would think that any
rabbi,
of the
that's
honorific
respect.
titles.
Sure.
Yeah. They didn't. They simply.
I think if there was a U.S. senator on the ship, they would refer to him as senator.
I don't know. It's a good question. I didn't see any, so. Probably not a good time for
I've
them
never
to
been
go.
on a cruise, so
This is my first. We'd never been on one before, so it was
So how soon do you want to go on another one?
tomorrow.
Good.
ah.
I love it. It's the best form of vacation.
So we've been invited for another one.
Oh, really?
In a year.
Wow.
So we'll take a look at that. And I truly needed it. I think you can see I look better. I know that I'm feeling like I'm not totally wrung out. It took me a good 4 or 5 days. So I'm glad it was a long cruise, because it took all the way to wherever the first
Panama?
stop was. It wasn't Panama. Panama was almost done. But we were tired, actually, of some of the road trips by Panama. It was like, oh, if this is Tuesday, it must be Belgium. Kind of a feeling. And which is why the quip on my Facebook is this Bogota or Aruba. But I'm not even sure where we went.
You got me thinking Beach Boys now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, that was
Aruba.
yeah. I've been singing Kokomo like, yeah, everywhere. And so here's a little piece of trivia. Did you know that nothing was actually called Kokomo before the song?
Yeah.
The Kokomo Island name came about after the song because they were capitalizing on the publicity of the song. But the song itself says everybody's got their own Kokomo where they can take it slow. So they knew that it wasn't real.
Right.
And they put that in the song, and people don't pick up on that little line. And now there's a couple of Kokomos because people have capitalized on the
Well, people
song.
wanted to go there. I want to go there.
Yeah, where you can take it
Find
slow.
your own personal one.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and everybody has one. Everybody has a place.
My waterfall.
Yeah, it can be your waterfall. It's whatever. It can be a walk just in the park. It can be your backyard sitting. You need a place where you can unwind, and that's what the cruise reminded me, that I needed to do that more often. And now I get to jump back in and do the final submission of my dissertation for my psychology PhD. So that'll be wrapped up. And have some exciting classes I'll be teaching next semester. I'm teaching in Okeechobee.
Oh.
And I think I'm also teaching up in Vero and down in Stewart. I still have yet to teach at the main campus. I've never done that. But I may or may not be teaching at Pruitt. I don't know. So it's going to be an exciting year.
Well, you got a little runaround car that you can put lots of miles on? Because it sounds like you do a lot of running around.
I do a lot of running around. I go through a tank of gas every week. And it's just part of the territory.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And I obviously have to time my cruises to when I can do them between the congregation and school and all of that. So we already looked at when Hanukkah is next year. Hanukkah starts December 22nd
Wow.
next year. So it's going to be the flip. Well, it's because we've got an extra month.
You may have to explain that to people.
See, Judaism uses a lunar calendar. I've only got 3 minutes, so I've got to do it quickly. And Judaism uses a lunar calendar. And since lunar cycles are not 365 days, that's a solar year. A lunar year is anywhere from 300 and some odd days. 4 times 12, 48 weeks, plus a little bit, because a lunar month is 29 and a half days, kind of, sort of. And so every once in a while, 7 out of 17 or something like that, you have to have leap years. And a leap year is an entire month. So yes, I'll raise that point that, if we're going to talk about a solar year, then yes, you've got 365 or 366 days. But if you've got a Jewish year, you've got anywhere from 354 days to a lot more. And so the two calendars constantly are moving back and forth. Hanukkah is always on the 25th of Kislev. It's a lunar month. And so that changes. Now, the Muslims don't use a leap year, so their year is shorter. Their year is always 12 lunar months. And so every 33 years, they come back to the same time on the solar calendar because of that. But the Jewish calendar is what's called intercalated. Our calendar is intercalated. The Hindu calendar is intercalated. The Chinese calendar is intercalated. All older cultures use a lunar calendar rather than the sun because it's harder to see a sun day, or a sun year, rather. But it's really easy to observe the moon and its cycle. In fact, moon month, you can hear the connection in there. But so a Jewish calendar or a Chinese calendar, that's why Chinese New Year appears to move around. It's because the Gregorian calendar is solar. And so Hanukkah next year, December 22nd.
Wow.
Yep. There you go. Thank you, everyone. This is Rabbi Shafir Lobb for Ask a Rabbi. Thank you.